This is In the Loop. I'm Christian Bryant. It's good to be back in the chair after having cried my eyes out listening to Adele all weekend. I'll make sure to rehydrate over the next hour, but in the meantime, here's what we got for y'all tonight. There's a new rule going into effect when it comes to the COVID-19 vaccine and some workplaces. We're looking at key dates around the mandates. Then the holiday season is right around the corner, but don't let these supply chain shortages take a toll on your holiday cheer. What to know when it comes to finding a tree and other holiday traditions this year. But first,
Till mommy is here, baby boy, baby boy.
Fire!
Tiny families who need you, pets are people too.
Bash your opponent!
for the longest time, toy companies have placed their toys in two very distinct categories: boy toys and girl toys. Now, that's not to say that little boys and girls didn't play with each other's toys. I mean, that wasn't uncommon. You may have been one of those kids or knew a few who did, but for a long time, toys like those were often marketed specifically by gender. But the public's view on gender and traditional gender roles has shifted over the years.
Parents are becoming more open to socializing their children in ways that are not conventionally traditional to their sex assigned at birth.
Dr. Megan Moss is a developmental psychologist and professor at Michigan State University. She says this new trend in de-emphasizing gender is a part of a cycle of progress.
There used to be a lot of gender neutral stuff, girls in Legos commercials and boys playing with kitchens, in the 70s and 80s. And then it started to get really, blue and pink in the 90s. We see the ebb and the flow of this gendered toy situation, but we do seem to be in a space and time where we are trying to pull back a little bit on how crazy gendered things have become.
And that's led some folks to question why we need to be so specific about whether a toy is for a boy or a girl. Why can't it just be for a kid? To that point, California recently passed a new law requiring large retailers to include gender-neutral toy sections. It won't actually take effect until 2024, and even then, it will apply only to businesses with 500 or more employees in the state. The law doesn't ban gendered toy sections. Instead, it requires they have a section with a reasonable selection of toys, regardless of if they're marketed to boys or girls. So, a lot of conditions, but still pretty notable. It's a step toward de-emphasizing gender, but long-standing norms may make it tough for these changes to translate from parents to the playground.
Even if as a parent you can control the media in your home to a certain extent, if you are a little boy and you go to preschool and you put on the tiara, chances are the other little boys are going to call you a girl, and they're going to make fun of you for trying that. Or if you're a little girl and you want to play trucks or dinosaurs or something with the little boys, they might say, no, you can't do this because you're a girl. And that kind of socialization is really difficult to change and intervene on.
Critics of California's law, though, worry that it tries to impose some of the changes in public messaging about gender. And they think it adds another requirement for businesses that limits their ability to adapt to a changing market. But despite the criticism, the market is moving away from gendering their products, including many classic toys. Newsy's Amber Strong digs into the history of gender and toys and shows us how companies are taking new steps to make their toys more inclusive.
After these messages, we'll be right back.
If you grew up in the 80s or 90s, the only thing better than Saturday morning cartoons
Hi kids, we're home early.
were the ads. And while you may be used to seeing boys with trucks and girls playing with dolls, sociologist Elizabeth Sweet says the concept of boy versus girl toys has ebbed and flowed throughout history.
People often think toys have always been this way. They've always been pink and blue. They've always been hypergendered, and that's just really not the case.
Using catalogs, Sweet discovered that toy ads in the early 20th century simply used the word child. Gender-targeted ads accelerated in the 20s and began to fade again by the 70s.
There were examples of toys that defied gender stereotypes. Boys shown with kitchen sets and girls shown building, and boys and girls playing together a lot in the advertisements.
By the 90s, the targeted ads had returned.
Gender toys tend to embody more fantasy roles in the late 20th century. So the princess and the superhero that we see everywhere today, those really came on the scene in the late 20th century.
Megan Perryman of the UK-based Let Toys Be Toys says she noticed the power of those targeted ads on her own child.
So I can remember going into a shop when my daughter learnt to read and suddenly her saying, "I don't want that, that's a boy's toy."
She now works to get rid of gender stereotypes in toy stores. So far, her group has convinced most UK retailers to drop the boy and girl labeling from their websites and stores.
To say construction toys as opposed to boys' toys. It's not harmed the retailers, it's not harmed children, it's actually allowed children and parents to find the toys they're looking for.
Bringing the concept to the States has taken some time. In 2015, retail giant Target got rid of the traditional boy, girl, pink, blue aisles, but it didn't come without significant pushback.
God made us male and female. That's just a fact.
Fast forward to present day with California's 2021 law requiring major retailers to offer a gender-neutral toy section, and the pushback remains.
A doll line designed to keep labels out and invite everyone in.
Some of it may have to do with the idea that promoting equality in toys is also a way to push for a more non-binary and gender non-conforming society. In 2019, Mattel introduced its first gender-free doll collection, which they say isn't about gender politics but inclusivity. While some pushback may be cultural, Sweet says some may have to do with Americans' desire to maintain a sense of freedom.
People have a hard time with the idea that corporations need to be regulated, that they can't be just left to their goodness of their own hearts to do what's right for kids.
Regardless of objections, changes are happening, even if it starts with the toy makers themselves.
I'm building a world where everyone has a chance to be creative.
Recently, Lego made a promise to make sure their toys are more inclusive, after research showed 76% of parents said they would encourage Lego play to a son, versus only 24% to a daughter.
This call for getting rid of gender stereotypes isn't a new thing. This is much more about going back to the way that we used to do things when we encouraged brothers and sisters to play together, or friends who are boys and friends who are girls to play together.
Amber Strong, Newsy.
Many thanks for that, Amber. And it's worth noting, we aren't just seeing these moves from toy companies. It's become a wider trend across multiple industries. Target made a similar change in 2015 when it stopped putting kids' toys and bedding into separate boys and girls sections. And 2 years later, they introduced a gender-neutral clothing line for kids. It's a growing trend as other clothing retailers, including H&M and Zara, have already launched gender-neutral fashion lines. To some extent, they're following the market. Research by ad agency J. Walter Thompson found that 56% of Gen Z customers shop outside their gender. We have a quick break coming up, but stay with us. After the break, we'll catch you up on what's trending and maybe even figure out why gas prices are so dang high. Welcome back, gang. There are a lot of vitriolic conversations that can divide us online, but much like world-ending crises and sci-fi movies, there's always something that can bring us together. In this case, it's something to be mad about. Here's what's trending. If the COVID-19 pandemic and uncomfortable conversations around social issues don't keep you from seeing family during Thanksgiving, gas prices might. Gas prices are at their highest level since 2014. AAA puts that national average at about $3.41 as of Monday, November 22nd. And folks on the West Coast are being hit in their wallets the hardest. The average price there in California reached about $4.70. So, what gives? The rising prices could be explained in part by the supply chain crisis caused by the pandemic. What did you think I was gonna say? Oil refineries cut gas production during the pandemic because, let's be honest, we weren't going anywhere anyway. And now demand is greater than the supply. President Biden has ordered the Federal Trade Commission to investigate high gas prices. And while we may not see it before Thanksgiving, relief could be on the way. Oil prices have started to dip from their record-breaking high, which could indicate relief is coming. Hashtag Justice for Janet trended over the weekend, and so did public draggings of Justin Timberlake after the premiere of a new documentary called Malfunction, The Dressing Down of Janet Jackson. The documentary seeks to re-examine the well-tread territory of the so-called Nipplegate at the 2004 Super Bowl halftime show, with a focus on why Jackson caught so much flack and Timberlake didn't. The doc dives into Janet's career leading up to the incident, what happened to her afterward, and the sexism and racism that are threaded through it all. Included in the documentary, appearances by a former NFL commissioner and MTV executives who helped produce the show. Not included, Janet Jackson and Justin Timberlake, the two people who you'd really want to hear from. The Women's Tennis Association, the organizing body for women's tennis, is saying something don't seem right after Chinese professional tennis player Peng Shuai seemingly re-emerged over the weekend. Peng disappeared from the public for more than a week after accusing a Chinese government official of sexual assault. But in a pair of videos posted on Twitter by the editor of a state-run news outlet, Peng appeared to be dining with friends and taking part in a ceremony before a tennis match. The International Olympic Committee also released a photo of what looks like the IOC president having a video chat with the tennis star. According to WTA President Steve Simon, these videos are insufficient. He said in a statement, "While it is positive to see her, it remains unclear if she is free and able to make decisions and take actions on her own without coercion or external interference." Simon added that if there isn't proof that Peng is safe and can move freely, the WTA, which has 9 tournaments in China, would stop playing tournaments in the country altogether. If there's some lingering anxiety about gathering for Thanksgiving this year, there's good reason for that. We are still in a pandemic, and right now there's a campaign to get 28 million kids ages 5 to 11 vaccinated against the virus. Around 10% of kids in that age group have received at least 1 dose of the lower dose Pfizer vaccine since November 2nd. But just like with grown folks, vaccine hesitancy is leading to an increase of cases. In Michigan, pediatric cases doubled within 2 weeks and have reached record highs as parents and guardians are reluctant to sign up their kids. Nationally, 2 million kids ages 5 to 11, or 7%, have gotten at least 1 dose. We're going to keep it on COVID vaccinations for just a moment. Monday marked the deadline for all 3.5 million federal employees to get vaccinated against COVID-19, and the deadline for federal contractors on January 4th. As of Monday morning, more than 90% of federal employees had already gotten at least 1 dose of a COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, about 5% requested or received an exemption. Still, vaccine mandates have been met with controversy and political backlash across the country. Our partners with the Washington Post video team tell us more about these mandates, their successes, and the pushback against them.
As national coronavirus vaccination efforts continue, millions of workers across the United States will be required to get their shots under federal vaccine mandates.
We've been patient, but our patience is wearing thin.
Federal employees, government contractors, and healthcare workers are mandated under these rules. Medical and religious exemptions can be applied in some cases.
A vaccine mandate is a requirement that you get vaccinated or face consequences. You are expected to comply with that order. So if you're not, you will probably face disciplinary action that could include, in a worst case scenario, being fired from your job.
We will protect people's right to work. We'll protect businesses' right to operate. Nobody in Florida loses their job due to these mandates.
These policies have stirred political, social, and legal battles across the nation. Separate from the mandate for federal workers, the Biden administration is also requiring companies with at least 100 employees to comply with a vaccine mandate or provide weekly COVID tests. While these requirements have been paused in an appeals court, there are some key dates coming up. November 22nd is when the mandate kicks in for federal employees. And January 4th, the deadline for federal contractors, private companies of 100 or more people, and healthcare providers who work at Medicare and Medicaid facilities.
There's one important exception that we should note, and that is December 5th.
That's when employers must be in compliance with other coronavirus requirements.
Meaning, unvaccinated workers have to be masked, employers have to give employees paid time off to get vaccinated. All those other rules kick in on December 5th.
Those who decide to remain unvaccinated can seek an exemption from the requirement.
These limited exceptions on these mandates usually concern medical or religious reasons. As a matter of fact, tens of thousands of people have already applied. Now, whether you are granted an exception and what that means are a totally different story. So if you are one of those people who are granted a legitimate exemption from getting vaccinated, it doesn't necessarily mean, though, you'll be able to continue business as usual. I'll take the example of United Airlines to illustrate what could happen. That airliner obviously falls under the federal contractor mandate. So 2,000 workers of that airline were granted exemptions, but they were also asked to move on to positions that do not require them to face customers. Those that refuse that might be put on unpaid leave.
Mandates do appear to have helped boost vaccination rates among target populations. United Airlines, which had one of the strictest mandates, said its employee vaccination rate increased to more than 99%. Even still, millions of Americans remain unvaccinated, and President Biden's promise,
we're going to protect vaccinated workers from unvaccinated coworkers,
has a way to go.
After this break, HR leans into AI. Just kidding, but only kind of. We look at how one bot is helping some employees have some tough but necessary conversations. If you run into an uncomfortable situation at work, you may be hesitant about how to approach it. Do you say something to your manager or just keep it close to the vest? That can be a pretty tricky thing to navigate, but one company is testing out a new bot that can make this process a little easier. The bot would focus on conversations surrounding sexual orientation, race, religion, age, and mental health. National correspondent Michelle London speaks with someone who used the bot when an issue came up and explains how it helped.
Haven't we all had a difficult conversation in the workplace? Well, don't you wish you had a place to flush out those emotions?
It sounds like a form of sexual orientation discrimination.
That's where AI robot Josh comes in.
So when a T-Tech employee feels discriminated against, this is the new safe space to come in and address those issues. With a simple click of a button, they instantly have a bot to share those feelings with and get feedback from around the clock.
The voice of Josh is actually that of an artificial intelligence bot called Humanify DEI Plus, designed to diffuse the situation.
We have sexual orientation, we have racial discrimination, gender.
You're actually physically having a one-on-one conversation with a bot that's actually responding back to some of the things that you're talking about.
T-Tech's Vanell Matthews helped design the bot for its 58,000 employees and clients.
As a Black woman, of course, from South Mississippi in a very rural town, I know how stereotypes impact your confidence, your self-esteem.
Hey, I need to get some advice about my new manager.
Matthews is hoping this bot offers a solution to prevent others from facing similar personal struggles she's faced with coworkers in the past.
He said some very derogatory, offensive things about another female colleague, and I absolutely froze. I mean, I literally froze from disbelief.
Following the death of George Floyd, Matthews noticed tension between workers of all races.
We can no longer try to sweep these types of conversations under the rug.
No one's looking at them. They're not under a microscope, but they still get real-time coaching directly afterwards.
The bot is also armed with advice to help employees to show more empathy in their responses to peers.
Some could confuse this with a module training that happens during the onboarding process. How does this stand apart from those training modules?
What you do with the bot is practice every single time. And depending on what you say, the bot is going to respond in a different way.
We're absolutely being called to embrace these type of diversity and inclusion issues and to discuss them in a very sensitive and practical way. Hey, you could have demonstrated a little bit more empathy.
But are we ever done and satisfied in diversity and equality? No. Because there are going to be topics that come to the fore that maybe haven't been as prevalent.
Thanks for taking the time to speak to me.
In Denver, I'm Michelle London reporting.
Thanks for that, Michelle. Gun violence is on the rise across the country. Homicides rose nearly 30% in 2020, the largest year-to-year rise in over a century. This leaves many cities looking for solutions on how to combat this problem. But where to start exactly? Data shows that a small percentage of the population in some cities is responsible for the majority of shootings in their area. One group in Northern California is testing out a program where former gang members mentor active offenders with the hopes of building trust and ultimately decreasing violence. The program includes things like trauma therapy and helps offenders set personal goals. National correspondent Amanda Brandeis shows how this program and programs like it are working to provide people with the necessary resources and tools they need to make a difference.
As kids, our dreams are limitless.
When I was growing up, I actually thought I was going to be an NFL player.
But for Devrick Hill and so many others, dreams are often cut short by reality.
Yeah, I thought I was going to be the biggest NFL player ever, all the way until like ninth grade year, my cousin died. So, that kind of changed me.
On Fresno, California's west side, gun violence is routine.
Call my name, I'm risking everything. Music is the way how I ease my pain, how I deal with my pain and stuff like that.
We have violence like LA, and we have turfs like the Bay. Red and blue don't really make a difference here. It's where you live.
Aaron Foster says the cycle is fueled by trauma and grief.
I lost 2 children, gang violence. My son was a gang member, but my daughter wasn't. He was killed Memorial Day. And 4 years later on Memorial Day, my daughter was killed. We had to figure out something to do because retaliating wouldn't do nothing but add to the problem.
He turned to other cities, looking for strategies to stop the violence.
Every dot represents a shooting.
Landing on one designed to build trust with those most likely to pull the trigger.
The guys we dealing with in these instances, they're never going to tell the police anything. That's just the code of the streets.
Under the Advanced Peace model founded in Northern California, former gang members are trained to mentor active offenders, building bridges through their shared experiences. Before Fresno, it was deployed in cities like Sacramento and Stockton. Leaders there say it's succeeding in helping to diffuse gang tensions before they end in gunfire.
I really miss my cousin.
It may take me 6 months to get him to engage, but I show up every day for 6 months. So he know that I'm not going anywhere. And then he can open up and tell me what his hopes and dreams are.
Those who commit to an 18-month fellowship are paired with a mentor known as a change agent who helps them set goals. Participants are also provided resources like job training and trauma therapy.
I was hesitant. I was hesitant at first.
Hill turned to gang life after losing his cousin and eventually put his trust in the program.
We are in the streets daily.
After 6 months, participants are eligible for monthly stipends of up to $1,000, a component that's faced pushback. Critics are skeptical of a plan to pay criminals.
Has to earn it. So it's not a stipend for us. It's an earned income credit for accomplishing the goals that you set for yourself.
While the stipends have made for viral headlines, none of the participants in Fresno have received one. But they have in other cities where the program is running.
It's the title that people frown on. But don't label this young man because anybody can change.
It wasn't meant to be. We're taking trips like they actually gave me studio time, beats, confidence.
Having something to believe in is filling a void.
Make me feel like I got somebody to call on. Like I say in my music, just make me feel whole.
In Fresno, California.
We give them permission to dream.
I'm Amanda Brandeis reporting.
Many thanks, Amanda. Up next, we're talking about the holidays and what you need to know about where to find your holiday essentials. All right, welcome back, gang. It's about time to deck the halls with boughs of holly, whatever that means. But this year, it's looking a little more expensive to do so than usual. According to the U.S. Department of Agriculture, the price of live Christmas trees have nearly doubled since 2015. And if you thought, okay, maybe I'll just get a fake one then, the costs for artificial trees have also gone up. The recent supply chain issues have affected production and transportation of the trees. So, if you still need one, national correspondent Chloe Nordquist tells us what you can expect.
Before your Christmas tree becomes the center of your holiday decor, it spends years here growing.
We are growing a crop that takes, 7 to 10 years till you can harvest it. Every year it grows about a foot. That's why it does take a long time.
Here at Quarter Pine Tree Farm, they are preparing for the busiest part of the year.
We are a choose and cut tree farm.
Tagging, cutting, and hanging trees and making decorations, preparing for people to come. And this year, the price of cheer may be a bit higher.
Prices are going up across the board with everything. We sold our trees 2 years ago for $60, and we raised them, $5 last year, $5 this year. So we're selling our trees for $70, and I think that is comparable to what we're seeing across the nation.
It creates a lot of difficulty in terms of managing the supply chain. Just because the lead times are long, there are lots of things that can go wrong.
Supply chain economist Prakash Murshandani says Christmas trees are a unique product, a short life cycle with a short period of demand and a long time to grow or create for artificial trees.
The supply chains for both of these types of trees has gotten affected.
This is mainly due to transportation.
As far as artificial Christmas trees are concerned, almost all are imported. 80% come from China.
Big retailers haven't been able to bring all of their trees in and get them through the ports.
Mac Harmon is part of the nonprofit American Christmas Tree Association and the CEO of Balsam Hill, an artificial Christmas tree retailer. He says they've had to raise their prices around 22% on average to help offset transportation costs.
If you're buying a tree that's been trucked to you, or if you're buying an artificial tree, there's no question that the prices are going to go up.
And for states that grow a lot of real trees, getting them to other parts of the U.S. could also be impacted.
The availability of transportation, trucking, is certainly going to affect sending the trees from Pennsylvania to other locations.
Beth Bossio's stepfather, Jim, opened Quarter Pine Tree Farm in the 1990s. But it's more than just a tree farm.
These are Fraser fir cones. We dry them in here. Then we run them through this equipment over here.
They operate a Christmas tree seed orchard too, and they're one of a few to do it.
There's probably 5 of us in the country that really do it in an industrial way, that do Christmas trees.
The seedlings that grow from these seeds are distributed to over 300 farms in the Northeast, and Beth sees them ramping up their supply.
Just in the last 4 years, farmers are planting more and more trees. It used to be that I would start taking orders, and I would still be taking orders in February the following year. We're already sold out, and that's because farmers are ramping up their numbers.
While your Christmas tree may have a higher price tag this season, industry experts say there will be a tree for you to put the presents under.
You just need to shop early. Yes, supply chain issues across the board with a lot of things, but like I said, we're never going to run out of trees. It's just, you might not find the size tree that you're looking for. It may be a 7-foot instead of an 8-foot, and that tree is still going to provide the scent and the experience that you want no matter what.
I'm Chloe Nordquist reporting.
Many thanks, Chloe. All right, before we talk about this next shortage, I'll give you a few seconds to get the kids out of earshot. Are they gone? Okay. So it turns out Santas are kind of hard to come by this year. I mean, if anyone needs me, I can throw on a Santa suit and be the best Black Santa you've ever seen. I'll do whatever I can to keep the holiday spirit alive, but I'm just one person. Last year, a lot of places canceled their St. Nick training events. Yeah, that's a thing, because of social distancing. And then this year, we have the whole labor shortage. National correspondent Bo Evans has more on this Santa shortage.
Things are already getting festive at the streets of South Glen Mall in Colorado. They are kicking off the holiday season with a Christmas parade, and everyone is waiting for the guest of honor.
It's Santa! Santa! Santa's here!
It's exciting, it's thrilling, it's magical. The children are really the core of the magic of Christmas.
Susan Mesko is donning her Mrs. Claus outfit as she helps Santa at the holiday parade. She also runs a Santa school and knows that this year it might be harder to book Santa for your holiday party.
Usually we do about 60 Santas live. They start in February with their classes. In the past couple years, because of travel situations and people not wanting to be in a conference situation, what we found is about half enrollment of the Claus clan.
The labor shortage that's been impacting the whole country seems to have made its way to the North Pole as well.
Seasonal labor is traditionally in the same target market where it's been a difficulty hiring.
Jack Buffington runs the supply chain program at the University of Denver and says it's not shocking the labor issue is impacting St. Nick.
If you think about it, what's it like a 4-hour seasonal shift, making $20-30 an hour? I mean, gosh, and especially given the fact that, most people who fit in this category are really not supposed to be in public, in big crowds, around unvaccinated people.
This year, more people want to have a party.
Demand is up. So, if you're trying to have a party on the weekend in December, you might have an issue finding a Santa. But of course, Mrs. Claus has a solution.
You can have just as much fun on a Tuesday night. S'mores and cookies taste just as good on a Tuesday night as they do on a Saturday. So if people are flexible, Santa's going to be able to make it to every single one of those parties. Just like everything else we've been through this last year and a half, a little flexibility goes a long way. And maybe it shouldn't be so shocking that there's a shortage of Santas this year.
I don't know why everybody's surprised. There's only one Santa Claus.
And there's one night he definitely should be available.
And boys and girls, don't forget that if you've been good, no matter what happens, that Santa will be there on Christmas Eve.
In Colorado,
Ho, ho, ho! Merry Christmas!
I'm Bo Evans reporting.
When you're back, we're talking about cows and climate change. We're taking a look at how cows can help us cut back on emissions. Welcome back, gang. When you think of the biggest players behind carbon emissions, what comes to mind? Cars? Planes? Coal-burning fumes? You may not think of farming first, but agriculture actually accounts for 1/4 of all emissions worldwide each year. The biggest contributor with that is livestock. So it's no wonder many researchers dedicated to cutting agricultural emissions want to start there. And good news, there have already been huge breakthroughs in changing a cattle's diet that are proving better for the climate, the farmers, and even better for the animals themselves. National reporter Chris Conti tells us how.
As fall's final days linger, life on the farm grows a bit colder and a bit more quiet.
Just going to get the cows up and encourage them to come down and eat.
But for Ryan Courtwright, there is still plenty of work to be done. Plenty of dairy cows to tend to.
They want to rest. They're lazy.
Ryan is responsible for overseeing this 300-acre farm in Lee, New Hampshire. While it might look like any other commercial dairy operation, this land is owned by the University of New Hampshire. Ryan is an employee of the university, and technically, in a way, so are these cows.
Every time they come in, a couple cups.
Most of their lives are monitored for various research studies. This machine can tell how much methane the cows are exhaling with each breath. We'll come back to why that's important in a moment.
Yeah, there's more methane coming from the front end of the cow than the rear end.
First, how these ladies might be fighting climate change. See that hay the cows are eating? It might look like your typical feed, but there's something else these land animals are eating that comes directly from the sea. Seaweed.
This one of the seaweed. There's different species.
Andre Brito has spent the last few years feeding cows seaweed in various forms or another. What they found is that by adding even a small amount of seaweed into a cow's diet, they can reduce the amount of methane cows produce by up to 20%.
Not necessarily replace all the hay in the diet. We basically replace small amounts of those typical feed source that are fed to dairy cows.
You might be thinking to yourself, so what? They're just a bunch of cows. But consider this, the methane that these cows produce is a far more destructive greenhouse gas than the carbon coming from your car. The methane from these cows is 80 times more potent than CO2. The harm those gases are doing to the atmosphere is profound. Most of it actually comes from the way cows digest their food.
Agriculture, right, in general, also is one of the source of methane and greenhouse gas emissions.
By some estimates, 25% of all methane is produced directly from fermentation by cows. With the world's population growing, farmers are producing more food, which means more cattle, and yes, more methane.
We should be looking at this now, of course. It's timely, and it's very important to be looking for those solutions right now.
For farmers, the best part of all of this is that by supplementing seaweed into this herd's diet, milk production and quality have remained incredibly high.
Any seaweed that we feed to those animals had no negative impact on milk production and also milk components.
An unlikely way of bridging the gap between land and sea, in hopes that in some ways it might help save the earth. In Lee, New Hampshire, I'm Chris Conti.
And for anyone that wants more cow content, today's your lucky day. We ain't done with cows yet. There are other ways some researchers are working to cut down on carbon emissions from cattle grazing. Only this time, instead of controlling what the cows eat while they're grazing, they're focusing on how the farmers manage the land the cows are grazing on. As a part of our data log series, Newsy producer Ellen Rolfus tells us more about regenerative grazing.
Dale, dale, dale. Hey guys, come on. If we can grow good grass, we're gonna have great cows.
Michael Heller has been raising beef cattle and sheep for more than 30 years at Claggett Farm, just outside of Washington, D.C. But he often thinks of himself as a grass farmer first.
Cows are cows, so they were designed to eat grass. To give them really good grass, I have to think about the grass first and use the cows as the tool to grow really good grass.
On his farm, Heller uses a technique called adaptive multi-paddock grazing, or AMP grazing for short, relying on simple electric fences to move and contain his cows on small areas of land.
I've got 60 paddocks for these cows. I have other paddocks for other cows, and that means I can rest the fields for up to 60 days, which is ideal. When I first came to this farm, I took soil samples. The organic matter levels were about 1% to 1.3%. Doesn't mean much to you until you hear today, this field probably has 4.5% to 5% organic matter. That means we've increased it 4 times.
AMP grazing has one other advantage. It increases the soil's ability to store carbon.
The cows are making for really wonderful grass, which will then sequester that carbon from the atmosphere. If there were no cows here, it would be growing up in weeds and it would not be nearly as effective at producing biomass. And biomass is what we need to produce because that's storing the carbon and sending it down to the roots, where it then gets stored in the soil.
When researchers modeled different greenhouse gas scenarios in North America, they found that if 50% of ranchers switched to AMP grazing, it would have a far greater impact on emissions than if ranchers reduced the number of animals by 50%, but continued other land management practices like feedlot-based systems. While studies like these are very promising, there are still a lot of unknowns about AMP grazing, especially when it comes to scalability. Outside of academic studies, it can be very difficult to measure changes in carbon levels in soil over time. And the amount of carbon stored can vary greatly based on the type of soil that's present, precipitation levels, and temperatures. Plus, perhaps most importantly, the amount of land it takes to raise cows with AMP grazing is far greater than the amount of land that's needed to raise cows on feedlots. Using more land to raise cows could exacerbate losses of soil carbon. especially if intact ecosystems are destroyed as a result. And the benefits of amp grazing wouldn't outweigh the environmental harm done.
A lot of people think that they can't eat beef if they want to be environmentally
sensitive.
Yeah, environmentally sensitive. That's a good way to put it. What would you say to those people?
What I would say is yes, you should eat less meat. Grass-fed is good. Less meat is even better.
Widespread expansion of amp grazing will likely depend on consumer demand and additional incentives for farmers to make the switch. But that hasn't stopped the likes of Heller, whose farm demonstrates how cows can be part of solutions to address climate change, not just the cause of it.
I've been grazing for 35 years and I still haven't mastered it. But these guys are doing most of the work on the farm. I get to open the gates and say, have at it.
As always, if you have any thoughts on the show, we'd love to hear it. Hit us up on social using the hashtag #NewsyInTheLoop. Feedback is welcome, but cow content is also acceptable. Stick around for our recap of our biggest stories as we close the loop right after this. Welcome back, gang. We only have a few minutes left, so let's close the loop on some of our top stories. First, we told you a bit about changing gender norms and how they're affecting perceptions around kids' toys. For the longest time, toy companies have placed their toys in two very distinct categories: boy toys and girl toys. Now, that's not to say that little boys and girls didn't play with each other's toys. I mean, that wasn't uncommon. You may have been one of those kids or knew a few who did, but for a long time, toys like those were often marketed specifically by gender. But the public's view on gender and traditional gender roles has shifted over the years.
Parents are becoming more open to socializing their children in ways that are not conventionally traditional to their sex assigned at birth.
To that point, California recently passed a new law requiring large retailers to include gender-neutral toy sections. It requires they have a section with a reasonable selection of toys, regardless of if they're marketed to boys or girls. And then we dove into holiday shortages. Both real and fake Christmas trees have skyrocketed in price.
If you're buying a tree that's been trucked to you, or if you're buying an artificial tree, there's no question that the prices are going to go up.
And for states that grow a lot of real trees, getting them to other parts of the US could also be impacted.
The availability of transportation, trucking, is certainly going to affect sending the trees from Pennsylvania to other locations.
While your Christmas tree may have a higher price tag this season, industry experts say there will be a tree for you to put the presents under.
You just need to shop early. Yes, supply chain issues across the board with a lot of things, but like I said, we're never going to run out of trees.
And you might be a little confused if you don't see a Santa at your local mall this year. There's a lack of them nationwide due to a labor shortage.
When you think about it, what's it like a 4-hour seasonal shift, making 20, 30 bucks an hour? I mean, gosh. And especially given the fact that, most people who fit in this category are really not supposed to be in public, in big crowds, around unvaccinated people.
Some Santa schools have seen enrollment down by about half. So if you're trying to find a Santa, you might have to come up with an alternative. That's it for this episode of In the Loop. If you missed the top of the show, you can watch the full episode on demand on the Newsy app. Otherwise, just keep it here to catch up on the day's news.